how do we move from being consumers to being creators? We need to feed into the algorithms how we want to see ourselves. That's why I'm getting such wonderful images from ChatGPT and Sora. I was like,
Maybe the algorithm is biased because it doesn't have enough information, in the sense that we are not creating the information. I know that you can also intercept the communication along the way and determine what kind of information should be produced. But the people will create information based on their awareness, based on what they know. But what we are trying to preach, what we are trying to promote.
A lot of times when we say about decoding and remembering, it's within us. But even there's an aspect that I know from maybe it's also from my direct lineage of the power of music to heal, the power of the instrument that you use, the power of appealing to the water spirits. Because even when you're saying that our ancestors are everywhere and our codes are everywhere, it's in nature.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining on in today's episode of the Obehi Podcast. I remain Obehi Ewan for your host in this podcast. We love to talk about storytelling. It's our strength here because we believe that our story is the most powerful instrument that exists in the world, in the sense that it helps us to be able to differentiate ourselves quite easily, which is different from maybe when we are trying to pretend to be who we are not. That is really the harder part of the job. Instead, what we can do is to be ourselves. That is simple, no? But everybody know his mother's name. Everybody know his father's name. If I ask you where you grew up, you don't have any problem saying that. But now when you want to be like Elon Musk, you find it difficult to do, no? Because you're not Elon Musk. If we own our story, we have more chances in the world. This is what we're actually promoting here.
Sure, my brother Obehi. Thank you for this opportunity to have this conversation. My name is Chiyedza Nyahuye, originally from Zimbabwe, but have been a bit of a global nomad for the past, almost 3 decades of my life, I guess. I'm currently based in the United States, and my main, what I'm going to be introducing you all to today is why I decided to launch an initiative called African AI Auntie. And the reason why I started that, it's actually a bit of a 21-year-old journey, because even though I was exposed to the best education in the world on full ride scholarships, when I went home to Zimbabwe for 14 years, I applied for jobs over 700 times and never once got called for an interview. And so even though I'm lucky that I moved back to the US a couple of years ago, it was earlier this February that my niece, who was studying in India, who sent me a text message on WhatsApp. I said, Auntie, how do I make money online? So again, it brought to the forefront where I continued my ongoing questioning of what is the relevance of a certificate and a degree if it doesn't translate into money, into a job that you can actually sustain you. So I'll pause there for now.
That's interesting. Chiyedza, try to pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
I know a lot of Nigerians think I'm Igbo.
How do you know? How do you know I was going to go there? So tell me something about that. I'm curious. As a Nigerian, I must be curious about that.
So Chiyedza, I'm of Shona origin. It was a Zulu Shona as our clan. Shona was more of a colonial grouping, but my mother named me Chiyedza because she saw me as her light in her moment of darkness. Because when she was 6 months pregnant, she was told by the doctors that there wasn't a baby existing inside of her. But whatever they misdiagnosed, a family friend who was a doctor saw my mother weeping in the hospital corridors, and then he looked at the x-rays. Yes, there's a baby right there. And so he took over her case. And so when I was born, she called me Chiyedza because I was her light in darkness. Basically, God's light is what my name means.
That is very interesting. I think we might trade that a little bit. Okay. We're not really going so much deep in the conversation into the epistemology of the language itself, but I'm still curious. CHI, which is chi, what does it mean in your language?
It's more of a prefix. It's like a kind of like a pronoun in a way of my full name. Because I know Chi means God in Igbo. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
But personal God, as it were. Okay, yeah, go on, go on.
Uh-huh. But in terms of Shona, Chi is like the beginning of a name. So even in my family, I come from a family of 7 children. Well, 8 that came out of my mother, but 7 of us. Well, actually, there's 6 of us left. But all of us, our Shona names all start with Chi. And then we all got English names because at that time, even though it was just before we got independence and after we got independence, if you wanted to register to go to a private school, you needed to have what they call a Christian name. So my mother decided to call all 7 of her children with names starting with Chi. So it was Chikomborero, Chipo, Chinyaradzo, Chioniso, Chiyedza, Chemaya, Chitarisro. And so that's all the names. But my English name is actually Marilyn, but I've never been called Marilyn ever in my life. I'm the only one of my siblings who was never called by her what they call Christian name. I've always been called Chiyedza. Whereas when they went to school, they're called by the English names and not their Shona names.
Okay. Thank you for that. I don't know, maybe I probably will go to come back to this conversation because that part really was striking, because it was very striking, this not just the word itself, but the interpretation you were giving to it, light, a God's light, no? So I've tried to see if there is a coincidence there or is actually a misinterpretation or is actually what it is. Because I've interviewed a lot of people here who I've interviewed a guy who's an expert on African culture and African religion. And he have told me one time that there is a unification of all the religions in Africa. They are the same. Now, when they are the same, we talk about interpretation, but we also talk about the root of the word itself, the root of the meaning itself. You see, my name is called Obehi. The he, it means exactly in Igbo, which is Chi. And we're talking about personal God. In Esa language, he meaning is referred to personal God, which is your divine guardian, as it were, no? Which is a kind of a divine guardian that is assigned to you from eternity. It's basically going to be there forever. You might be born and die, but your he never dies. A kind of a primordial, as it were. And this interpretation is existing in Yoruba language. In Yoruba, the same thing, basically the same interpretation is called Ori, as the O-R-I.
Ori.
Yeah. So, and we have seen that there is this, of course, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and I think, I don't know much about the Shona language, but this larger language, they're part of the much larger language in Africa that is called the Niger-Congo language group, as it were. So I don't know if that is related to you. That is why I'm a little bit more curious to know how that might be related or something here.
Well, actually, my cousin has been doing some research, and he's already traced that our particular clan originated from DRC, from the Congo.
Yeah.
And then we migrated to East Africa, and then we went further down south to what is now called Zimbabwe. So in a lot of ways, I can understand how there's this translation of lineages that we don't really, because again, we never taught about ourselves by these colonial systems. So we have to do the work ourselves. So he's been doing that kind of tracing as to, okay, because even when I talk to some people in Nigeria or Ghana, they're like, you look so familiar. You look like my sister. Like, well, the genes are there. It's just that we haven't, talked to each other for a couple of generations. But yeah.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting.
Yeah, but we've always been nomads as Africans.
Yeah.
You can take it 5,000, 10,000 years ago. We've been everywhere, even across ocean.
Absolutely.
But I know in terms of when you're talking about, okay, how is it the cheese and the Igbo, and I'm like, we're probably the same people. We're probably cousins, sisters, cousin, brothers, twin in various generations of mixing.
That's so interesting. Today we're going to be having an episode because we usually have live program. Today we are talking about African Diaspora Storytelling Series, which is something that we talk about every 14 days. I will try to bring out this conversation again because we have different experts there, from spirituality to African ancestral healing practices and coaching, to expats in the US of African descent, of course. So this is an argument that is very important for us. Of course, I know I would like to talk to your sister. I want to know about her finding, because why it is important for us. Okay, we are talking about story here. We're talking about our existence, our connection, our people. Because unfortunately, the European man have done a very good job in confusing us. And of course, confusing the world about perception, about reality. And they think that what they wrote about us is correct, but it is wrong and it is dangerous in the sense that they try to paint a picture that we don't even have a history. And then when they try to admit it, they try saying something to the effect that our history actually started from slavery, because slavery happened before colonialism. And then, of course, they don't usually say slavery. Okay, they talk about colonialism because then they brought us education. They help us to read and write. Therefore, we must be grateful to them. And to the African American, they must be very thankful to white people because they brought them Jesus, for example. You see, they brought you civilization. So we need to thank them for what have happened to us. They didn't say that they confuse us through their educational system so that now we are confused. Because when we start saying, you made mention of maybe 10 years of migration in Africa, I could even go as far as about at least 25,000 years that we have been migrating, moving, so that we are basically the same, because the language don't lie, the linguistics don't lie, the DNA don't lie. There are certain things that might be missing, but there are certain things that cannot be hidden. So it is important. Not today. We'll come back to this conversation again on another day.
but I understand what you're saying very loud and well, because I keep hearing this African proverb that until the lion learns to write, the story will always be told by the hunter, right? And so a lot of it, yes, we've been confused. I say maybe the last, I don't know what, 500 years or so. But I also still believe that our ways of being is still downloaded to us from our ancestral DNA, right? Even the name African AI auntie, I got that download from my great-grandmother. And 100 years ago, she was in eastern region of Zimbabwe now. She was a shaman, or what we call in the colloquial terms in modern day, she was a naturopath. So she used herbs and music to help people heal from cancers, renal failure, heart failure, any of that. And not only did she work with our own indigenous people, the white farmers, the colonizers, were coming to her. The Muslim and Hindu Indians would come to her. This was 100 years ago, right? That's my great-grandmother, right? So when we talk about, as much as we've been confused by our colonial experiences, there's a way that I feel that our ancestors still come back through us and remind us who we are. And I'll give you another snippet about my great-grandmother. I don't know if you know the instrument called the mbira. It's like, it's a bit far from me to grab it. But the mbira is a traditional instrument that was used in healing ceremonies and still is, right? Yes, the colonizers told us it was demonic and evil, and they even persecuted people. But my great-grandmother used to play that instrument. I only learned about the mbira when I was a second-year student, a sophomore in Minnesota in the United States at a liberal arts college. And I was feeling rather disconnected from home, feeling homesick, trying to figure out, okay, I'm getting all this white education, but how relevant is it to my African context, let alone my Zimbabwean context? And so I found a Jewish American woman in Berkeley, California, who was teaching people how to play the mbira. She'd been playing it since she was a teenager. She even went to Zimbabwe in the 1970s to learn. So I got in touch with her through email back in the days. It was like, 1999? I ended up in California in the summer of 1999, and I spent 2 weeks with her. And she actually taught me at least 12 songs to play and sing in 2 weeks. And even she said that nobody ever does that, because usually it takes people months just to learn how to play one song.
So, are you referring to this instrument?
Yes, that's the mbira. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
The mbira. So then I went back home to Zimbabwe. You know, the whole Y2K thing. I managed to go home because I had a study abroad program that brought us to travel around Zimbabwe for 3 weeks, funny enough. And so I managed to stay home. So as soon as I arrived, I was greeted by my mother and my grandmother. And so I spent an evening with them. First, I hadn't seen them in 2 years. And so I whipped out my mbira. I said, Mbuya. Mbuya is grandmother in my language. Mbuya, see, look at what I can do. So I started playing the mbira for her. And I started singing and playing a song, and she started crying. The song is called Chikuaya. It's the song that's usually played to the river spirit. And that was the exact song my great grandmother used to play in her healing ceremonies 100 years ago. I did not know anything about my great grandmother until that moment. Because my mbuya says, how can my granddaughter, who's gone to school in China and the US, come home playing my mother's song? And she was crying. And again, you know that silencing that the colonizers did? Because my mother and my great grandmother and my grandmother never told me anything about my great grandmother's healing qualities as a shaman until that moment in 1999. And so they were confused, like, oh, hold on, aren't you supposed to come back more Americanized, more Britishized? Why are you more African than us? That was the question. Even my sisters, even all my clothes, even in Minnesota, I inherited all these aunties. And so they were all dressing in these beautiful African clothes. I had my Amma, she's Hausa. Yeah, that was my first Nigerian auntie. Amma used to make me the most amazing food. Yes, even though I was crying most of the time because it was so hot, with pepper soup and the goosey soup and the fufu. Oh, very good, but yo. So I was very well surrounded. Because a bit of the backstory of that one was in my second year, I went to some personal development workshops, and it brought up most of the childhood traumas. So here I am 10,000 miles away from my own mother. And I know in the African context, we're supposed to be in, like, they say it takes a village, right? You're supposed to have your aunties and your uncles and other people you can go and talk to and seek counseling from. But when I was growing up, even though I came from a large family, my mother's an only child. And then my father, even though he had siblings, I think 8 or 9 siblings, they had had a family rift before I was born. So the only family I really, really knew was my own nuclear family. But again, like what I said, it's in our ancestral DNA of knowing who we are. So even in Minnesota, at that time, I remember it was my second year. In fact, some African American faculty decided to bring African and African American community members onto campus just to see how they can support the Black students, because it's predominantly white, Minnesota. So they all introduced themselves, what their professions were, and then when it came for us students to stand up and ask for what we wanted, all I did was stand up and said, I need a mother. And I sat back down. And that's when that's when I met my Abba Hannatu Green. She came up to me and said, I'm your mother, you're coming home with me. And literally, she has 6 kids, right? So she was my favorite place to go to, because literally I get into a house, she called it a village. I throw myself on the floor and just play with her kids, like they're my best friends. And I still do that. I've got 14 nieces and nephews. I do that with all of them. They ask them, okay, what do your Auntie Chiyedza do with you? Oh, she puts us up in trees and makes us, So I'm used to being that way with children. But back then in college, it was very pivotal for me, because yes, I was going through whatever I was dealing with. Yes, I was trying to get these degrees, trying to make sense of my life. But I think even the imprinting of my DNA put a sign that said, my name is Chiyedza, please adopt me. Because I traveled all over the United States, even in those 7 years I was in Minnesota. And everywhere I went, I would find aunties who would adopt me on the spot. It's like almost like they recognize me, like, you're my daughter, come. Some of my favorite aunties were in New Orleans. I had aunties in California, and aunties in New York, and aunties in Chicago. And by the time I left Minnesota, I had 14 aunties in Minnesota. 14, 1-4. And so I was the most spoiled person, because my parents said, do you even go to school here? Because you're never here. You're always going off with your aunties. Like, yeah, because my aunties like to love me. so, so that was my intentional community. But even though I didn't grow up with it, like I said, it's in our DNA. We know I feel like it's almost like our spirits recognize each other. And when there's a certain calling within one person, it's almost like you trigger other people around you to become that support system for you. So Yeah, I'll pause there on the auntie. I call it the auntie effect.
Thank you so much.
Because I've been auntie to 14 nieces and nephews, age range now from 7 to 32. And I've helped raise at least, and I really helped raise all of them at some point in their life. I'm still, of course, in their lives. But yeah, so
Beautiful.
now it's my turn to be auntie.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love this thing that we are doing. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
All right. You know, sometimes when you look at some African history, some experiences that we have gone through and where we are today, especially when you put the time frame of the Euro-Western society, you will look as if we are totally lost. We are totally lost all hope. But when you manage to retrace yourself back to Africa, then you look at the time frame of Africa and also our perception of time. We have no reason to lose hope.
Yeah.
Because our time is not like the Western time. Because, for example, I do tell people that if the Bible was to be rewritten, we will remove the end of time because there is no end of time for us, at least.
No, because our concept of time is very different from the linear version that the Westerners have told us time is. But yes, continue. Yes. Yeah.
We're going to be able to connect to the past so that we can understand what is going to be the future. So there is no reason for us to lose hope because we are the hope. And we are everything that we are waiting for. So there is no reason to really believe that, oh, it's gone. No, 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 we are here. If you can still talk, meaning that you are the one. No other person is.
I'm smiling because I think in songs. Okay, so you triggered a song for me that my aunties who are African American used to sing, but I know it's one of us. The song is by Sweet Honey in the Rock, and they sing, "We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting.
That's so true.
We are the ones, we are the ones, we've been waiting. We are the ones we've been waiting." Well, there were all sorts of different parts, but I've actually conducted it in a whole audience and divided them up into different parts. And so, yeah, so that's where my mind went when I was listening to you saying that.
Beautiful.
Yes, we are the ones we've been waiting for.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
we just need to remember.
Yeah. And when we talk about the question of memory, or maybe what we are referring to, maybe here talking about story, triggering those memory, we see that they are never really gone. They are not. They have not gone anywhere. We just haven't been able to maybe wake up yet. One expert would tell me that in Africa we are sleeping. We will wake up. By the time we wake up, everything we need is already there. It hasn't gone anywhere. All we just need is to manifest it and bring it back because our ancestors have been around. They are still around because we are part of them. They are part of us. So they can never abandon us. They cannot abandon us. Why? So we connect to them. They connect to us. So this future that we are looking for, really, it is we that we are looking for. And when we talk about, let's look at it from the point of view scientifically, if we can say it like that, no? You see, there is what the people refer to as epigenetics, no? That if your ancestors have suffered something, you can suffer that, okay? Now,
it's inherited. Like they say, the inherited traumas of, I guess, the slavery and colonial experiences, we're still healing from that as African peoples because it's been passed down to us through generations.
Yeah, I want to reframe that. I want to reframe it saying that if that is possible, which means that all the knowledge of our ancestors are still in us. So it's not, we didn't inherit only the trauma, we also inherit the knowledge. We have,
how else did I start playing the mbira in Minnesota, of all places, in the United States, 10,000 miles away from where my great-grandmother was?
Because you are part of it.
And she found me across oceans and still brought me back to myself.
Yeah.
You see, so that's what, so yes, I totally agree with you. As I'm saying, it's in our DNA. We just need to reawaken it and find ways to resuscitate it and continue to build. Yes, continue.
Beautiful. Oh, it's lovely. You know, also when it comes to the question of knowledge, by the time we wake up and we start asking, when we ask, we'll get the answer. Anyway, I think that is where I want to start, so I can ask you a question.
Yes, go ahead.
One time I was talking to a scientist working within language and also AI, Then I
Mm-hmm.
was saying that there is a part of AI that I see to be highly connected to African spirituality. Then the person opened up. Then we entered into something really very beautiful. We start talking about communication, no? Because
Uh-huh.
communication is nothing more than encoding and decoding, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that I send information to you, you're able to receive it, but to another person that I didn't send the information to, the person might not be able to read it. Of course, it's true that if we are looking at the regular Western education today, where we write A, B, C, D, any person can read it. But that is not how communication was done in ancient Africa or in African society. Another way to understand that is that take a look at, for example, the kind of communication that was received and exchanged during the tension time between the United States and the USSR, you know? And those
Mm-hmm. In the Cold War.
Cold War,
Mm-hmm.
you know? There was a lot of communication that was exchanged. If you are an ordinary person, the communication that was sent by a CIA agent to the CIA office, if you
Mm-hmm.
get it by the way, you will not be able to read it. You don't know what it means because they are coded.
Encrypted.
But by
Mm-hmm.
the time it get to the whom the information was sent, they will be able to open it up in a place. They will see it. They will read it. He said it's true
Mm-hmm.
for the USSR and KGB. It means that we have knowledge to all this. We have access to all this information. So
Yeah.
for Africa, what we need to do is to learn how to decode our information. If we know how to decode it, it is everywhere. It's in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
The European didn't understand, or it doesn't mean that we need to see it from the European eyes because we are not
No.
European. We need to look
Exactly.
for the way to see it from our eyes, from the way that we read it. This
Yep.
document, they said that we don't, no, we didn't document it in the European style because we didn't need to, because we're not European. We don't need to read it from the European perspective because that is reading it from the outsider perspective. Like they were saying, for you to exist, you need to exist according to us. But who are you? A little child is telling an adult, you need to prove to me. Who are you?
I agree. Because even the Moors, right? They're the ones who actually basically brought all the sanitation and all those back in the 1100s, right? Even the 900s. They went to Europe and actually civilized them in a way because they didn't have the technology that we had on African continent. I even recently saw the story of Benin, right? That I didn't realize that there was a Benin wall that was longer than the wall of China. I was like, what? But guess what? The British are very good at destruction and looting, right? That's what they did. I mean, why is it that all of our artifacts are in their museums? What do they know about what these artifacts are supposed to do? Those are ours that we were using in our daily rituals and our daily ceremonies. But again, as you said, it's all about the eyes of the beholder. So in a way, I feel that even what you're saying about how do we learn to decode our Africanness. I know for me, one of the easiest ways that I do it is through songs and music, right? Because even every time I'd play my mbira or every time I sing certain songs, certain things would happen to people in the audience. And I know it's not me, but whatever needed to happen from people listening to me playing this music and singing certain songs in a certain way, it's almost sometimes I'd feel like ancestral presence would take over my body because I know it's not me singing, right? But without fail, every time it happened, people come up to me afterwards, whatever their culture are. One lady, I remember she'd been in a car accident and she came up to me after this. She said, I don't know what you did or what you sang or what you're doing with your music, but all my pain is gone. Another one was this Chinese professor. He was actually my professor for finance in graduate school. And he came up to me and he says, Chiyedza, I don't know what you did to me, but all I'm feeling is when I'm just wanting to cry and go back home to my people. These are people who are my full-grown adults, professors, right? So a lot of times when we say about decoding and remembering, it's within us. But even there's an aspect that I know from maybe it's also from my direct lineage of the power of music to heal, the power of the instrument that you use, the power of appealing to the water spirits. Because even when you're saying that our ancestors are everywhere and our codes are everywhere, it's in nature. Look at the way nature is organized. Look at how even our totem system, right? We have the whole totem system. I know in my father, I know Yera Moyo Chirandu, which is like the heart. And then my mother, Wanoyera Shumba, which is the lion, right? So each African clan holds something sacred. So in essence, if we look at the collective, everything is sacred on the earth, right? Because each and every species, each and every plant, each and every tree, somebody's holding is preserving it, right? That's our way of preserving our nature, our ways of being. So when I'm looking at all of that, like you say, decoding, it's there. It's just that I feel it's being, shall I say, dummied down a bit because of our education system that teaches us more about Europe and Asia and the United States than even about ourselves. But at the same time, we're very intelligent people, right? Even now, when you're looking at AI, I'm smiling and laughing because I was like, Africans, we are there. We take over, man. We take over. Guess which is the number one country in the world that uses ChatGPT? It is Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
It is Kenya. But what I realized was the power to influence algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've been on this AI journey trying to create stuff and content since January. The number of apps I've been through. My frustration is that, okay, it's mostly, we know it's mainly the algorithms are mainly white male based, right? So every time I type in, I want a Black African woman, I'd get a biracial looking, light skinned African American. And like, why do you keep giving me these results? Because it wasn't right. I started doing that in Sora and ChatGPT. They give me the most beautiful images of African people. And my focus was on African students, right? So I had to give it the prompts. I want African students who are tech savvy, who are solving problems, the university settings, And so even if you look at all my social media postings about African youth, beautiful, very culturally representative, even Muslims and different cultures wearing different types of clothing. I was like, see, they got it. And then when I heard that ChatGPT's number one users are from Kenya, I was like, yeah, of course. We took over. Because we know how to tell our stories. We know how we want to be represented, right? And so that's where I go to create my images. I don't go to these other apps. I still stay in ChatGPT and Sora, and that's where I get really African-looking people rather than whitewashed ones. And even when you're talking about accents and things like that, there are various companies that actually do a great job with different, like I know Video Express AI, they actually have African accents. So there's an accent from like South Africa, Tanzania, Kenya, Ghana. I know it's more generic. I'm not saying that it covers everybody because we know we've got thousands of cultures and thousands of languages on the African continent, but it was at least a bit better rather than having a young American woman's voice on an African person. It doesn't make sense, right? For me, it's about authenticity of representation. So that's been my intention in all of that I've been doing, especially in the last, couple of months. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that also have been one of the issues that we have raised here in the sense of that maybe the algorithm is biased because it doesn't have enough information about us in the sense that we are not creating the information. No? And because if they usually will, of course, I know that you can also intercept the communication along the way and determine what kind of information should be produced. But in the overall, the people will create information based on their awareness, based on what they know. But what we are trying to preach, what we are trying to promote is that we should play. We should play in the game. Don't let other people just play for us and see.
Exactly.
We should. I did a video one time. I say this is a side that we are seeing on the phone. I said it's a hard time we turn it like this, so that we see we become the creator of the information, not just the consumer of the information. Because this way we can choose to put the type of information that we want to put there. How can we leverage the power of AI for our own good so that we can choose what we want to put in the database? Because the algorithm is going to respond based on the information that is on the database.
So when I started my journey, I know I'm a bit young with African AI because I actually only started this journey in July this year. And so my intention about the images I create is to dispel the media misinformation about African context. Is always war, famine, starving people, dirty people, all those crazy images is what we've been fed for decades, right? So I intentionally, because ChatGPT and all these AI tools, is about what you feed it, right? So I describe exactly how I want these people represented. I wanted vibrant African youth. I wanted intelligent African youth to be represented. I wanted to show their passion, their creativity, their resourcefulness, their problem solvingness. Even though, as much as I'm saying, okay, I'm offering how to show African youth how to use AI tools and upgrade the digital skills, they've been doing it for ages. I highlighted stories that I found online of this young man in Malawi. He's creating electricity from air, right? We're getting these guys in Kenya who are creating robotic hands. You're hearing of students even in Nigeria who are creating tutorials and coding and helping younger generations to upgrade their skills and actually making it into a business. You're hearing of stories of South African students who are working with local businesses, helping them to upgrade their systems so they can be more visible, not only locally, but globally. So I'm more of the person who amplifies what already exists whilst also addressing the gaps of like, okay, the majority of people actually, unfortunately, still just like, oh, ChatGPT is fun, TikTok will scroll. But again, it's what you said. How do we move from being consumers to being creators,
Yeah.
right? So when the intentional creating, we need to feed into the algorithms how we want to see ourselves. I keep producing those images, right? That's why I'm getting such wonderful images from ChatGPT and Sora. I was like, see, now you get me. See, you understand. This is how I want to be represented. Yes, though ChatGPT does do some funny things sometimes with my images and like, my friend, some days you get it, some days you don't. But okay, we'll work with what we have. But again, it only gets better the more we use it and intentionally stay consistent. Because I know even now in ChatGPT, you can do custom ChatGPT. So in your custom GPT, you program the AI tool to understand this is how I want to be represented. This is the skin tone, the colors, the color schemes, the settings that you want people to see. Because even in the stories I've created, yes, some are in rural areas, some are in urban areas, but I'm very intentional that it continues to praise and uplift African intelligence, African brilliance, African ways of solving problems, and also still standing on the shoulders of our ancestral downloads, right? Because it's also the thing of bridging between our indigenous ways and also incorporating the technological tools that are available to us. That's the conversation that I'm always having. And I know there's certain elders, I'm forgetting his name. He's always talking a lot on I've seen his posts a lot on LinkedIn, where he was mainly saying, and I know Miss Kim, my friend, Miss Sally Kimango from Botswana, she always highlights some of his stories, where he's always saying that, you know what, as Africans, we've always been entrepreneurs. We've always been builders. We've been empire builders for centuries, since the beginning of time. So again, when you're saying about remembering, yes, we've been so miseducated away from ourselves for decades, but I always feel that when you look in the broader context and the broader sense of time, there always becomes a reversal and a reclaiming movement that's happening. Even with what I'm seeing on the African continent, they're saying, as much as they think Africa's behind, actually Africa's leapfrogging and it will be taking over leading the digital revolution, right?
That's so true.
You know what? I mean,
That's true. You see, another thing that I think is very important for most of African to understand is that we don't really need to copy the West to replicate what they are doing. What we just need, since we are playing this game, is to take the tool. But the content that we want to create, we decide that. In terms of the content, is full. Okay, let me give you an instance. It is true that in the traditional African system, you are not put in a class to learn. It didn't even make sense because learning is every day. It's every time, every moment. You were not supposed to put in a class of 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 children looking at a chalkboard. No, you were supposed to learn every day. And learning was also fun. Let me give an instance what I'm saying. Of course, I've said it in a number of my books, no? And when we talk about soft skills, no, because that was the topic just now, soft skill will be like those things that you were not taught in school, but are very important for you, like focus, like being able to network or collaborate and all of that. But all these things we learn it as babies, as children growing up. Now, imagine what we used to do as children growing up in Africa, in my village. As children, we organize catapult to go and shoot birds in the air.
Yeah.
They bring the birds home. And I say, if you don't think that there is a lot of coordination taking place there, then you don't know anything in life. I say, we're going to first of all organize ourselves so that first we don't get lost in the bush. That is one skill. Okay. Coordination.
Yeah.
What about making friends? What about being able to resolve the problem ourselves? Because when we go there, there can be problem. We don't bring the problem all the time, no? We resolve it there. I say, okay, what about preparing the tool that you put in the catapult to shoot the bird? Okay, I say,
picking the exact right stone.
Yeah, exactly. I say, okay, what about how do you even shoot a small bird in the air? You are sitting there. If you don't know how to calculate, how to be smart, how to be focused, because the bird is not like the bird is waiting for you and say, shoot me and take home.
Yeah.
The bird is very high up in the sky. For you to be able to shoot it, you must know how to focus. When we talk about focus as a soft skill, it's not new to us at all. We already know this before. It's part of our educational system.
It's a funny way, because when you're talking about how we learn as Africans, where it's all around us, as Africans, we learn from experience. It's from daily interactions. It's from daily problem solving. Whereas with schools, unfortunately, they say, sit at your desk. Whatever's in the book that's been written, usually by a white person, is the truth. So remember that and repeat it, right? But it has no relevance to my daily life. So that's where we grew up in a bit of a schizophrenic kind of reality. Whereas it's funny, my mother was a teacher before she and my dad became entrepreneurs 50 years ago. But yes, the book was seen as God, right? But I find it funny because even the way that I went through my education system, even when I was in Hong Kong, China, I was always looking for experiences because that's how I learned. Yes, I excelled academically, but for me, where I most learned was when I'm busy kayaking in the South China Seas, or hiking up into mountains, or working with children who are refugees, right? Because there was a refugee camp of Vietnamese refugees down the road. Even when I was saying in Minnesota, when I was in university, both undergrad and graduate school, and my friends kept saying, but do you even go to school here? Because you're hardly ever here. Because I was like, because for me, learning outside the classroom was much more valuable than what I was taught by any professor. I don't even remember anything I was taught. Seriously, in the classroom, I don't remember any of it, mostly. But I can tell you about experiences I had in New Orleans. I can tell you about experiences I had in Chicago, in Berkeley, and even right there in the Twin Cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, where, you know, when my aunties would take me to certain shows, or they would show me how to cook certain different types of food. I had Ethiopian aunties. I had Nigerian aunties. I had Native American aunties. I had African American aunties. I even had a Caucasian auntie. And even, you know, so in terms of, that's the way in terms of building community and daily tasks and daily sharing of breaking bread. And it's in the preparation stuff that you're doing, when the conversations, that's where the learning happens. It's not that, okay, take out a recipe, step one, step two. No, that's not how we work. And so even when you're saying about that, of the way that we learn, and the way that we've been knowing ways to do certain things. I remember growing up, yes, I was number 6 of 8 children, right? So by the time I was 2 years old, I was fluent in Shona and English, by the way, because my mother taught me English. And even I went to creche nursery school because one of my sisters was 3 years older than me. We were best friends. So when she was being dropped off for school, I screamed because I said, but how can you take my best friend away from me, right? So I actually started going to school at 2.5 years old. But I was very confident. I made friends very quickly. And there's another story about that one where I was fought against some white boy bullies, but that'd be a story for another time. I led my first, okay, I'll tell it now. I led my first army of angry toddlers. We're 2.5 years old. Okay, here's the story. So my sister and I were like 2 of the 4 Black kids in 1980 at a Dominican nursery school, which is predominantly white. So then in the afternoons at a nearby primary school, these white boys were like 8, 10 years old, would climb over the walls and beat up all the Black kids. So my sister and I went crying home to my mother, right? And said, they're hitting us. I don't want to go to school. So my mother's advice is very interesting, right? You said about the learning experiences, right? Yeah. So she says, why are you crying? You've got hands, you got feet. Fight back, or I'll give you something to cry about. So the next day, as African kids, we had shaved heads, right? Yeah. So we wore, as my sister and I wore overalls. As soon as we arrived, we started practicing on our white friends, beating them. Then I don't even remember how we managed to rally this. But when those bullies came over the wall then that afternoon, they were met by toddler fury. Imagine 20 balls of these angry toddlers kicking them, biting them, scratching them, right? And that's how we got them to stop. And one of them and my mother came early to pick us up. One of them had the audacity to run up to my mother, pointing at me, saying, he hits me. And my mother said, it's not a he, she's a she. And I learned from that age, at 2.5 years old, that nobody has the right to disrespect me and treat me less than a human being, right? We all are children of God, right? Whatever your skin color, we all have value. From then onwards, when you're talking about the whole socialization and learning stuff, I became a socialite. By the time I was 4 years old, I was going to birthday parties every other week. To this day, my mother says, I got so tired of buying all these cards and putting a bit of money in there because every other week, Chiyedza was in a birthday party. Every other week, Chiyedza was invited there. Chiyedza was invited there. I was like, yeah, because you're either my friend or you know my feasts. Those were your choices. But I'm not saying that I'm an advocate of violence, but that way of being has carried me through all my life. That it's very easy for me to relate to all sorts of different cultures. It's very easy to become friends.
Of course, you also need to take care of yourself. No, it's very important. You don't need to you don't tell children to go and start looking for trouble, but you don't tell them if they start beating you, just start crying.
No.
Well, you don't do that. No, if you don't defend yourself, they will just kill you, and they will still say you are wrong. Thank you so much, Auntie. For the sake of time, tell the people how they can reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you do.
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm African AI Auntie. You can find African AI Auntie on YouTube, Instagram. Those main ones. YouTube, Instagram, but mainly LinkedIn is how you find me. Chiyedza Nyahuye. And that's, and you're welcome to DM me. You're welcome to check out my social media posts. And yes, I'm more than happy to hop on to virtual coffee. So my landing page, well, actually it's called Business Box because it's more than just a website. It's called AfricanAIAuntie.com. That's where you can easily find me, schedule with me for a virtual coffee, and we take the conversation from there.
Lovely. So in 1 minute, if you were to leave people the central message from this conversation, what you wanted to go away with, what do you want it to be?
Remember the brilliant genius that you already are. And whatever cultural experiences we've been through, because I feel we all still recovering, whether we are the victims of colonization and slavery or the perpetrators, there's still a calling to remember our humanity. That will never change. That essence of Ubuntu continues to rise up again, over and over again in every single context. Even in European settings, I've seen it happen as well. So if anything, remember who you are, continue to find joy in life, continue to find healthier ways to be with other people in this world, because we are, in my viewpoint, all children of God.
Thank you so much, Chiyedza. It has been a pleasure talking with you, and there will be a lot of value here. So have a wonderful time. Of course, for all of you that have listened to the end of this conversation, I say thank you. And please remember to leave your comment here. Why not subscribe to this YouTube channel and share also with your friend. We bring in value here, something that can be helpful to you and also in your business. Why not? So reach out to us if you need any help, and make sure you share this video to those who might benefit from it, and continue to support us. Thank you so much, sister.
Thank you, my brother Obehi. This was fun.